to start? I don't know where to start, but here we are with the same beer again. The Paper Salesman. Ooh, and we're gonna pour it properly this time, so people can't tell us that we don't know how to pour
Doesn't
beer.
matter with IPAs. It matters more with the lagers and then like normal beers to do the tilt thing. But see, that's what happened. Now I just spilt.
Okay, you spilled a little bit. It's no big deal. There you go. There we go. There we go. Look at that. It's going.
Now I'm ruining the shot.
Okay, well, don't ruin the shots. And I ruined it too. Maybe it's just the IPAs. This is a really good beer, though.
They come out different each time. This batch is like more bitter than the last one. It's okay. I still like it, but
The sun split?
yeah.
Yeah, this one's supposed to be all golden yellow, remember? It used to be yellow. Like, deep yellow. Maybe a little deeper than that one. Now
We should go get those 9% ones.
Reddish brown. The 9% ones? Which 9% ones?
There was the witch shark and
You're nowhere near your microphone.
the witch shark and
The witch shark is done. There's no more witch shark.
I'm sure there's other ones. Just get those milkshakes that were like the 12% ones. You know that there's a mushroom in somewhere in Quebec that you could buy at the grocery store, and if you drink while eating that, like if you eat it on your own like a normal mushroom in food, it's fine, but if you mix it with alcohol, apparently you get the same effects as like magic mushrooms.
Hallucinogenic mushrooms.
So we should find that mushroom.
Or we can just get regular hallucinogenic mushrooms. I'd love to start growing my own marijuana and hallucinogenic mushrooms. I don't want to do them. I just want to hobby grow them.
Well, soon marijuana is going to be legal for growth for personal consumption.
We hope it's going to be legal for growth and personal consumption.
No, it will be for personal consumption, not for sale. Just the same way you can make your own alcohol for personal consumption, but not for sale.
Okay, well, then I'm just going to have to grow a bunch of it myself. If anyone's down to purchase their weed from Silerious.com.
Wait, but I just said not for sale, so you have to figure out how you do that. How are these places in Ottawa doing it? Do you know?
Right
So
now, since it's not legal, they're just doing it. They're just opening up shop.
But they
stocking.
are claiming to be medical.
Yes, because medical marijuana has been available in Ontario for over 10 years now. They've given it to patients with AIDS and cancer and a few other rare conditions, and they've been doling it out a lot lately.
Yeah.
Not lately. Then, now that they're thinking of making it legal, people are just applying for the license that they thought they were going to need, and then just selling it to whoever decides to buy it. Apparently, you can just walk into a store down here and anytime you want and buy whatever weed you want. Some places are a little bit more careful than others. Some places only take cash and want you to get in and out ASAP. And some places, they want you to hang out and talk to the staff, maybe get to know them.
Well, because there's some places that ask like for some form of prescription or some form of doctor's note or even like a prescription bottle or something.
Well, preferably, everyone have a note from their doctor prescribing them marijuana, or at least getting their license through those same means. Getting your license through those same means that you can order the stuff online, and no one gives a shit. Which is what I thought that it would be the best option for everyone. Just get your goddamn license and just buy it off the internet and have it delivered to your house by Pure Later.
It's gonna be interesting how this rolls out, how it's gonna change things.
Yeah, we're gonna have an entire society that's the first generations are going to be growing up with marijuana fully legal. Let's see where.
Still at the age of 19, though, the age limit hasn't changed. Still at the age of 19, the age limit hasn't changed.
The age limit hasn't changed, but what age did you have your first drink at?
Me personally? 17.
Me personally, 14.
Yeah, but like it's not like being legal or illegal is gonna make kids are smoking weed and drinking anyways. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It's actually probably better to be legal because then it can be regulated and ensured that some of it is safe. And maybe you can actually control. I don't know. Kids are gonna
How
get.
are they regulating kids overdosing on alcohol?
Legal age does make it some differences.
So what? People become alcoholics. Alcohol is legal. People become alcoholics. People become drug addicts. Things aren't legal and people become drug addicts. Legalizing is just going to open the door for people to do whatever drugs they want. And you know what? And now that we know that marijuana is going to be a legal drug after years and years of fighting, the next step is to say, well, the government lied to us about how bad marijuana is, so maybe they're lying to us about how bad other drugs are. I understand saying marijuana is illegal, and then kids being like, okay, government thinks marijuana is legal, it's clearly not, or like bad for you, and it's clearly not. But if the government actually admits that they were wrong all along, whoa.
No one says it's not bad for you, but there's no argument in which alcohol is legal and marijuana isn't, because when you compare the two, alcohol is worse for you than marijuana. The issue with marijuana,
So the solution is to legalize everything that's better
Oh,
than...
no, just specifically marijuana, especially because marijuana has other uses and benefits to it too.
So does heroin.
Okay, but I'm saying do you think alcohol should be made illegal?
I thoroughly believe that... here's my official progressive...
Or should cigarettes be made illegal?
Here's my official progressive stance. It's too late.
Okay.
It is officially too late for us to go back on such ideas like marijuana or alcohol. You can't erase alcohol out of human existence, because I'm pretty sure most of human existence exists because of alcohol.
Yeah, marijuana is entwined to human history probably just as much as
you're
tobacco.
Saying probably?
I don't know. I've never looked into it. We can look into the history of marijuana.
Sure.
That'd actually be an interesting topic. Soon. The topic-based stream.
A topic-based stream on marijuana and its historical reference.
I'm just saying that I'm not saying this for any other drug. I just mean marijuana specifically. There's no argument unless you believe that tobacco, cigarettes, and alcohol should also be illegal. There's no reason marijuana should be illegal. Just specifically in the context of those three.
Okay.
Other drugs, that's a whole different conversation.
I don't like the false equivalence. Cigarettes are not a real high, but it's a real addiction.
Yeah, and the health consequences are real.
Well, generally, the health benefits or effects of cigarettes are pretty much the same health benefits, or not benefits, health issues that smoking marijuana is going to cause.
No,
it is a
it's
huge
not.
amount of tar buildup in your lungs from inhaling burning with twigs.
No, because the rates between the two are different.
Sure.
And you don't smoke unless you're literally like, there's people you've seen will chain smoke all day long.
Yes, and I've also seen people who chain smoke marijuana.
Okay,
all
well,
day
those
long.
people probably have a high.
So now we have to figure out which field, what is it? Which stats we're going to be following.
I don't believe cigarettes should be made illegal. People should be free to smoke if they want to. Same thing.
I didn't say cigarettes should become illegal. I officially said it was too late.
Mm-hmm.
For cigarettes, for alcohol, for now it's officially too late for marijuana. Now, how is the government going to say, "Oh, we fucked up"? A third time? We were wrong. We were right about it the first time when it was legal. We were wrong about making it illegal the second time.
Yeah, they were wrong about making it illegal in the first place.
It's not what I'm saying. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that they can't literally turn around and say, "I'm sorry, we were wrong" a third time around. This is now a leapfrog of we were wrong, let's make it illegal. We were wrong, let's make it legal. Or no, it was we were wrong to make it to have made it legal, let's make it illegal. And it's like, oh, okay, well, we were wrong about making it illegal, let's make it legal again. And you can't go back after that.
Yeah.
How many times could you possibly be wrong? According to the government, every time. Just every time.
Well, if they don't pass it and the liberals lose and conservatives come back in power, then it might not be made legal. But I don't think that's going to happen because most Canadians want it. And on top of that, I think that's how Trudeau is going to campaign. Like he needs, how he needs like a big win so that he'll do what they want, so that like he'll do it right before the next election, which is why it's happening. Like they're gonna start rolling it out, but it's really gonna be like implemented before the next election, so that it helps. He's like, look, I gave you marijuana, vote for me again.
What is he gonna give him a second time around? They already got the marijuana. Is he giving them heroin, crack cocaine, ecstasy?
Well, we're gonna have to see what his campaign is gonna be this
Guess
time.
we're gonna have to see. And
It'll be like environment bullshit, probably.
yeah,
That's
see,
what he's gonna run
it's going
on.
to be a lot harder to convince drug addicts to vote for him a second
Mm-hmm.
time around once he legalizes marijuana and nobody wants to leave the house anymore.
There are plenty of cities where marijuana is legal and readily available, and people are functioning fine.
First of all, people that are functioning fine on marijuana are people that were functioning fine on marijuana when it was illegal. My problem with it was the new is going to be the new generation that's going to grow up with their parents smoking it. Continuously, regularly around them feeling absolutely zero stigma to wait for any kind of legal age, which again wasn't already happening, but now it's completely available and legal on every street corner. Now generations are going to be growing up, going to school completely high off their ass, and people, what happened when
As
what?
opposed to now, where they're doing exactly that anyways.
No, I knew people that smoked a lot of pot in high school, and you know what? They're still smoking a lot of pot and not doing much with their lives. That's the honest fact. There is that most of the people I knew that went on their tangents and joined fucking art clubs and like to smoke a lot of pot and get really high are still doing that with their lives.
Not people I knew.
Mhm.
Well, some are, some aren't. The thing with marijuana, though, is it's a little bit different than alcohol because, in a way, the fact that they've just let me get through this thought, okay? In a way, the way that they've rolled out marijuana, highlighting the medical benefits of it, and as like a way of treatment, as opposed to alcohol, which is rolled out as like a form of recreation. No one says treat your anxiety with alcohol, right? But you
Not anymore. They don't. They
okay,
used to.
Okay, but I mean, but that's
They
why
said the same thing about cigarettes.
Fine.
They're rolling out marijuana the exact same way they rolled out cigarettes. With, hey, what are you? You're stressed out. Have a cigarette. You're stressed out. Have a bottle of wine. You're stressed out. Have a drink.
Well,
have some
now
whiskey.
we have more data available to
and
look
yeah,
at.
we're rolling out marijuana the exact
Right,
same way.
because we've been looking at some of the health consequences, and there are health consequences to marijuana, which what I was trying to get at, which is the point with alcohol, for example. Being underage, like the risk with being underage and consuming lots of alcohol is underage people tend to binge drink, they tend to get into car accidents, they do stupid things under the influence. The effects on their body is not really that much. Like they're still young and resilient, and the amount of alcohol that they'll be fine if they stop drinking that way when they're older. But with marijuana, the reason that that's different is, in fact, marijuana actually has consequences if you do it younger as opposed to older, which it has long-term memory effects, right? So if you are over the age of 18 or somewhere around that age, and you smoke marijuana and you do it regularly, there'll be memory problems. But once you stop, after 5 years of stopping, your memory will, for most part, the neuroplasticity of your brain will return to whatever it was before.
Hopefully, it'll return.
Well, that's what they've found. That's what the research has found. But the research has found that if those who smoke copious amounts of marijuana at a younger age, under the age of 18, might actually have long-term memory problems. But then again, like it's just, but like the physical health issues like are related to this, is more related to marijuana consumption. Like if you smoke it, or like if you eat it and put it in your food, there's very like almost zero. Although I could be wrong about this, but zero health consequences. I will say that for now, and then fact check myself later and issue a correction if I am wrong.
Okay. So once again, I knew kids that were smoking pot with their parents as young as 11. With their parents as young as 11. Back when I was, almost 10 years ago. I mean, no, more than 10 years ago. It's almost closer to 15 years ago. They were smoking pot. Do you think they have productive jobs? Do you think they do anything other than live at home?
I don't know, but I know lots of people who smoke a lot of weed and are
I don't think you know what a lot of weed is.
productive people.
I don't think you know what a lot of weed
any
is.
weed. They smoke weed regularly.
No,
and
smoking
they're
weed
productive.
regularly and smoking a lot of weed regularly are two very different things. You also
Yeah.
have to take into account people who mix continuously alcohol and marijuana, as well as other drugs. Since once your alcohol lowers your inhibitions and marijuana makes you stupid, more so than the alcohol does, and they interact upon each other and make you super stupid and susceptible to peer pressure or suggestion. Because people always forget about the fact that drugs and alcohol absolutely impede your state of mind, and sometimes permanently.
Yeah, well, there's
So
different
they
effects.
were more susceptible to do more drugs. What they always told us that marijuana is a gateway drug, but they never quite explained how. So we could actually take a look at it and say, yes, this is how marijuana would make you more susceptible to worse influences in your life.
Okay, but the research doesn't show that. The research shows that most people who smoke marijuana, the only other drugs they do is tobacco and alcohol. Other than that, they don't engage in other drug use.
What?
There has been plenty of
I-
research on drug use
I will
behavior.
point out drug use behavior from my personal experience, from my short time living abroad, as I'm going to refer to it as. I have met all kinds of people from all walks of life and drug use. You know what they all had in common?
Mm-hmm.
They all smoked pot.
Okay.
All of them smoked pot, regardless of anything else. They all smoked pot, and they did heroin, and they smoked crack, and they did everything else.
They've done or
for your
regularly
research,
do?
regularly do.
Okay.
They regularly smoke pot, and they regularly do heroin, and they regularly do
Okay.
cocaine, and they regularly do crack.
Okay.
So for
That
your
makes up a
research
proportion
To
of
show that
over-
most of these people don't transition to other drugs or don't do anything else other than smoke cigarettes might not be legitimate research. Maybe I'm sorry. Maybe it's just bad statistical
No,
analysis.
because
Maybe
this has
your
been found
sample
over and
size
over
isn't
again.
fantastic.
This is samples of millions of people that has looked at drug use research over time, and they have found that over 70% of the population will. Okay, so again, about 80% of the population engages in alcohol use. Okay.
Okay.
Like if you ask a question in the past month, have you had a drink of alcohol? 80% of the population, well, no, actually like 60% of the population will say yes. 80% will say in the past year they've had a drink with alcohol in it. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to marijuana, it's about 30% of the population this is North American research for the most part. About 30% who say that yes to the question of they've had marijuana in the past year, and about like 20% that will say that yes, they've had marijuana in the past month. And then there's about like 10% that say that they do illicit drug use, like anything more than marijuana, so heroin, all of that's blah, blah, blah. Within the past month, there's a higher proportion that will say within a past year, and then there's a higher proportion that will ask if there's a lifetime.
Okay.
So that's how they get those kinds of statistics.
Okay.
Now, I may be off a little bit on the proportions, but there's a larger proportion. Like if you look at the population of the United States or in Canada, there's a larger proportion of Canadians that smoke marijuana, and there's a small that will answer yes to the question of have you smoked marijuana in the past month, in the past year, and lifetime.
Less than what?
Compared to people who will say yes to the question of have you engaged in opiate use or like crack, cocaine, crystal meth, all sorts of like things like that. So
Okay.
all sorts of those kinds of drugs, it'll be a smaller proportion. So you always have a higher number of people saying that they will have used marijuana and a lower
And then
number of
who
people.
do crack.
Yes.
Okay, obviously, There's clearly less crackheads in the world than there are people who smoke pot.
But if marijuana was a gateway drug, then the ratios between the two would be the same. There would be equal amounts of people who smoke marijuana and equal amounts of people who do crack and cocaine. And
depends on the social circles you travel within, the kind of questions you ask, how you ask the questions, and whether it's crack cocaine that you're leading to. It could be mushrooms, it could be acid, it could be bath salts.
Yeah, we ask literally every single one of those questions, and then afterwards you look and you code based on the type of thing.
So now my question is, who is your sample size?
This is based on like monitoring the future, which is like a study. Sometimes it's high school kids. Sometimes these are millions.
Okay, so gateway drug, as in it gets you into a certain perspective, into it eventually. So high school students, okay, they might be a bit young,
high
but
school students,
but
college students.
I know a lot of students and college students who do a lot of cocaine.
Census data, just general. There's surveys that are done by government and non-government organizations every few years, and they look at that data and they look at it. So you have, like, for example, when I was talking about generational research, that was a sample of over 10 million people.
Okay, so it's becoming more conservative.
This is a sample of like 10 million people, something like that too. We have like every 4 years, governments issue out surveys to people in high schools, in universities, in all sorts of different settings, and ask them about all sorts of behaviors so that we have an understanding what proportion of the population is doing X, what proportion of the population is doing Y. It's just general population research. Stats Canada is doing this. We can go look at Stats Canada right now, and these statistics will be there.
Is anyone doing any kind of stats to find out how many people lie to Stats Canada?
We have validity questions. There's questions set up in a way where we ask the same thing with different wordings, and if people don't answer similarly, we eliminate that person.
Okay, so your sample size started out big. What is the final sample size that you end up with after you take people out of it?
Again, because we do this every couple years, there's millions. There's millions
over time?
Yeah.
And again, who is your sample group?
Every 4 years when they do this, it's about, like, for example, when I did the Ontario student drug use, which was the students.
Who? Students? Is this all students?
My sample is about 3,000 people right now.
Is it all students?
The one that I'm working with, yeah.
Okay, so the stats that you're talking about is just students.
No. I mean, I'm just using the example.
Okay, so then I'm going to ask the question again. Who is your sample?
For Stats Canada?
For whatever you're talking about.
Okay, we have to look at how Stats Canada collects
you're telling me
data.
that you collected this much data, you have 30 million people, and you can't tell me who the sample group is?
I haven't done this. This is the research that has been done on drug use behavior. Stats Canada. However, Stats Canada gets their sample every few years. They get about 10,000 people, I think. And then over time, that adds up. And you look each year, and then you combine over a bunch of years.
So what about those people that Stats Canada can't reach? Mostly the drug addicts.
That's where I come in.
Okay, so what percentage of people are drug addicts based on your research and based on your interviews?
Specifically? Okay, so I personally looked at data for about 400 individuals. I have access to data for more than that, about 2,000 that I'm looking at. But and I haven't done my own analysis, but I know that it has been done, so I can go find the study and find out. If I reveal too much about the study, though, I guess I'll be doxxed because it's not that hard to. But anyway. But based on just doing data entry, they will be from drug users. These are homeless people who are living on the streets, living in shelters, living in rooming houses, who are transitioning every few months. They're living in tents, all sorts of places. Not all of them are actually drug users. So out of the like 400 that I'm talking about, maybe half of them will say yes to drug use, including marijuana, not cigarettes and alcohol.
So they don't include cigarettes and alcohol under illicit drug use?
No, they do, but those are measured differently.
So they don't include them.
So we have 3 measures. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you.
So out of the homeless people that live under bridges in tents, only half of them identify as drug users.
Okay, so
or admit to using drugs.
So about
not including alcohol and marijuana.
Okay, so there'll be a certain proportion I don't know in the top of my head how much, but there will be a certain proportion who will, if we ask, have you smoked cigarettes, alcohol, we ask these individually, cigarettes, alcohol, marijuana, we do those three individually, and then we have a separate where we ask a series including mushrooms, crystal meth, crack cocaine, we ask about opiates. We ask about like a whole variety of different things. And then we ask, have you used in the past 30 days, in the past year, or like never? Right? Or lifetime.
Okay, so how many of them say never?
So so majority of people, like I will say a high proportion, a low proportion will say never.
Okay, so
that they will have never.
So hold on.
Wait, but never what? Never had alcohol.
Can you just state that clearly? A very low proportion of people living under bridges and are completely homeless will admit to never doing drugs.
No, do you mean alcohol, tobacco, or opiates?
I'm pretty sure I said all.
All drugs?
All drugs.
Okay, but in the entire population, there's like at least there's a very low proportion of people who will say that they've never had
alcohol and cigarettes as a side category, and then be like, and then have you done any other drugs?
Why not?
Because marijuana is a drug, and
I know,
alcohol
but two
also
of them
has
are
an extent that goes to different degrees, does it not? Doing alcohol isn't doing alcohol. Doing alcohol is a societal thing that we do socially.
Most people drink alcohol. Over 90% of the population will say yes to have ever consumed.
So I really don't care about the people who say yes to alcohol.
Okay, fine.
I care about people. I also don't care very much about people who smoke because that's not part of our argument.
Okay.
Or the conversation. I care about people who smoke pot.
Okay, so there'll be there'll be like it's about 50-50 or 60-40, somewhere around that, who will say never.
Okay.
For pot, there's actually a lot of homeless people who have never smoked pot in their life. It's
okay.
So that does happen. Okay. And there's still a proportion of them that haven't done other drugs more than pot either. But there's a higher proportion that have done pot alone than those who have done anything other than pot, not including alcohol and tobacco.
I'm having a really hard time believing this.
Now,
I'm not saying you're lying. I'm just saying I'm having a really hard time believing
that
this.
Being homeless itself leads to drug use. So when you look at engaging in drug use before and after homelessness happens, whether drug use, so there's a proportion of people who are drug addicts and then they become homeless. Okay, those exist. Mm-hmm. Those people exist. Yes. Okay, but when you look at people who are homeless and see if their drug use, illicit drug use, including marijuana even, not alcohol and tobacco, but illicit drug use, including marijuana, after or before being homeless, that actually happens for not including that proportion that I just mentioned, that happens after becoming homeless. So a lot of being on the streets because of the culture there and the mental illness and the anxiety and the depression and the just being it readily available everywhere you are. There's a lot of things you
added there that I might not 100% agree with. Generally, people who have a higher tendency of becoming homeless are in a different field. Maybe a lot more impulsive individuals who have a slower threshold. So I'm not surprised that they end up on the streets and then start doing drugs.
No, because something happens to them. They get into a car accident and then they can't work anymore and they lose their jobs. And like it's also keep in mind like there's a difference between, again, youth homelessness and adult homelessness. People who are homeless as kids and running away from homes and stuff like that is a different group than people who become homeless or people who are homeless in their adulthood. And youth homelessness is actually, kids will do drugs more.
Okay.
Anyway, so yeah. But the research just doesn't, from what I'll look into this more, but there's really no evidence that says that marijuana is a gateway drug because more people do marijuana than they do other drugs.
And I'm I'm sorry I have to hold this belief, or at least this position, but I fundamentally disagree with that point. Because every single person I have known through most of my teenage years smoked pot and did other drugs. I don't know why you guys aren't finding the sample group that refuses to answer, either doesn't answer the questions honestly, or you guys just haven't found them. That
Or
absolutely,
maybe it's anecdotal evidence. Maybe it's just that circle that you've been exposed to.
That circle that I've been exposed to is a very large percentage of people who are drug addicts who do all the drugs.
Yeah. People who do illicit drugs also do marijuana, but not everyone who does marijuana does illicit drugs.
Do you know the percentages?
I just said, like, for example,
Percentages. Percentages. Numbers.
About 40% of the population will say yes to the question of smoking marijuana in the past year, or will say yes to the population of 50%, 60% will say yes to the smoking of marijuana in a lifetime.
Okay.
Okay?
60% of the population will admit to smoking marijuana throughout their lifetime.
In their lifetime.
In their lifetime.
Ever. Just
Ever.
even once. Ever.
Sure.
Okay?
Just like Obama only smoked pot once, but he
Right.
didn't inhale, and George Bush did cocaine, but he also didn't inhale.
Okay. So about 60 to 70 will say yes if you ever
60
smoked
to
pot.
70.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not even 60, it's actually
Something
up to
around
70.
there. I don't know exactly.
So 70% of the population admits to smoking pot
I think so.
at some
Somewhere
point in their
around that.
life.
Somewhere around that.
Over the course of
A lifetime.
over the course of a study that only captures about how many people a year?
No, this is over studies that have captured millions of people because it's the same average.
Okay.
Like they do the same study every few years. This
Okay.
is over in North America of millions of people.
Okay, so
Okay.
so 70% of the population admits to doing drugs, or at least
Smoking marijuana ever in their lifetime.
Ever
If
in
you
their
ask
lifetime. 70% of the population admits to smoking marijuana at some point in their lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If you about less than 30 to 40. Again, I don't know why I'm getting these numbers. This is based on memory. I'll have to look into. Will say yes to the question, have you done any of the following drugs in a lifetime?
Okay.
And that ecstasy, MDMA, crack, cocaine, heroin, opium, whatever. So I'll say about 40 would say lifetime. Less than
40 of the general population, or
Yes.
40 of the 70%?
40.
Because that's a very big difference.
40 of the general population.
You-
But they will
Are you
overlap.
sure about that, or
No, they look at a sample of millions of people and say they just round anyone who says yes or no to the question.
okay? So 70% admit to smoking pot, but 40% admit to smoking. So on average, more people
to lifetime.
lifetime. So out of all the people that's smoked pot throughout at any point throughout their lifetime,
No. I said out of just this. So you take 10 million people. Let's take 10 million people.
and if 70% of them admit to smoking marijuana at some point in their
Okay.
in
Then
their
you
lifetime.
ask the 10 million people. You don't take that 70% of 10
I understand how
million
statistics
people.
work, and
Yes.
that means that over half of the people who smoked marijuana admit to doing other drugs. Because 40% and 70%, right? Because it's 35%, which is half of 70%. So 40% is officially over half of 70%. That means over
But
half
no,
of the
you'd have to actually just take-
population are the
But
people who
that's not an
smoke
accurate
marijuana.
way of sampling it.
It-
You'd have to
it is-
take
it is an
that
accurate way of sampling it.
70% and then only run the analysis within that 70% to actually see how much it is. You'd have to ask within people who said yes to marijuana, then you'd have to see. Because you're running the same people. That's double counting.
Yes, because these people have to be double counted.
No.
Yes.
You take
Because
out
the
of
same
that
people
70%.
who smoke marijuana could be the same people that absolutely did crack cocaine.
Which goes back to people who do crack cocaine are more likely to smoke, are probably also smoke marijuana. But not everyone who smokes marijuana smokes crack cocaine.
Yes, I know how statistics work.
If you do
That's why
illicit drugs,
that's
you
why
probably
it's more
do
than
all of the drugs.
that's why it's more than half of the people who smoke marijuana. Because
It's
chances
not.
are, if you don't even smoke pot, then you if you've never even smoked pot, why would you fucking do crack cocaine?
Yeah, sure.
Especially since the study's been going for how many years? And marijuana is a very acceptable drug, which is technically my point. That if you don't even smoke pot, why would you do crack cocaine? Why would you do heroin? Because you start off at one point. So if 70% of the people admit to at some point smoking pot, and 40% of all people admit to doing other illicit substances
In a lifetime.
in a lifetime, I don't care. I don't care what the time frame is. If a percentage of people admit, and another percentage, and within that same group, another percentage admits to doing other
But it's
drugs.
not with you're not. I'm not saying it's within that same group. But fine, even let's say within that same.
How
group,
can it not be within the
30% of
same
that
group? We're only
70
talking about one group.
No, because you have to then separate those people out of the sample.
But we're talking about the same group. We're not taking different
But
groups.
there might be people who are actually in that group who don't do both, who do one or
which
the
is
other,
which is which
who
is
have
which is
done
which
only
is
one or
not
the
something
other.
we know and not information we have in front of us. But I'm willing to make a goddamn educated
do.
guess and say that the people who've never smoked pot are not the people who did crack cocaine. Okay.
Okay, but then
So
how do you?
then I can say that out of the people that did crack cocaine, the majority of them smoked pot.
Okay.
No. Can I not say that? Can I not make that educated assumption?
Out of the people who smoke crack cocaine,
Right.
yes.
So chances are the overlay
but you
is
don't know
that
which
people
one
who
came
did
first.
illicit drugs are the ones that did. Well, I am going to make an educated guess once again and say that you don't start off with crack cocaine. You might start
Depends
off
on
with
what environment
alcohol.
you're in. Yeah. Okay. Fine. Yeah. Usually you need to.
Right.
Escalate.
And my point
Okay.
is that it's right. That's actually one of my main. That's actually one of my main narratives is people escalate. They start off as creepy little people who like. Okay, I'm not gonna
Okay,
go
but
into a
even
weird place.
That would
The people
happen
start.
relevant to whether they're illegal or not.
What?
So then alcohol and cigarettes are just as much as gateway drugs. All drugs are gateway drugs, if that's your argument.
Cigarettes are not likely to be gateway drugs because the high is so small and minuscule that it doesn't really. It's not. Most people don't even consider it a high. Although it is, and it's incredibly addictive high, most people don't consider it because it almost doesn't register. But we all know the goddamn feeling of that very first fucking cigarette in the morning.
But most people
gives
who
you
do drugs
a
smoke
ti-
cigarettes.
Okay, that's my other point that I keep making. But if you want to get into it, I will gladly get into it. That's because people who smoke cigarettes have a higher what the fuck is the word? Higher tendency to be more impulsive and not make proper planning in their life. Also, not give a shit.
Mm-hmm.
If you're already smoking cigarettes, which we all know are deadly, then you have a higher chance of actually doing other things like other at-risk behaviors, as the psychologists like to call it.
Yeah.
So, cigarettes are my signifier for you already participating in risky behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's not a gateway. That's just a signifier. So if you chances are more than 75% of the population, I'm willing to say more than 85% of the population admit to smoking cigarettes at one point in their lifetime. So that's also an overlay claiming that most people who smoke pot will also smoke cigarettes because that's just the way that works. You smoke, you smoke, you smoke. If you can't smoke pot at work, you're gonna smoke a cigarette at work to calm yourself down.
Wait, hold on. But how do you know cigarettes didn't come first and then pot came?
I didn't say they didn't. I said that people in my books,
you engage
people
in-
who
so
have a tendency to smoke cigarettes are already in a category of at-risk behavior. I'm not
So
saying
if you
that
do
cigarettes
any type
are
of drug, you're at risk to do more to drugs.
Okay.
And over
Okay,
85% of the
so there we go. Now
engages in at least one
you're
of these
literally
things.
arguing my point that everything is a gateway drug.
Then to the same extent that
Yes,
cigarettes and
exactly like I
drugs-
said. You smoke pot, you drink fucking alcohol. It makes you stupid. It makes you more susceptible to peer pressure and other behavior. What's it called? Just being more susceptible to and open-minded to doing other things. So you start smoking cigarettes, and then you start smoking pot, and then you smoke cigarettes, you smoke pot, you drink a bunch of alcohol, and someone goes, "You want to try some coke?" And you go, "Okay, sure, why not?" And up the nose it goes.
But you're still not explaining why so many people can drink alcohol alone and not do other drugs. And
Well,
only the
alcohol
ones-
is a drug, as you yourself just pointed out.
Yeah,
and
alcohol is
it
very
might
much
be
a
a
drug.
gateway drug to smoking. It might be a gateway drug to God knows what. But why would they not do other drugs? I don't know. Alcohol's enough. Alcohol's cheap. It's readily available. It's everywhere. It's not an illegal substance. But you know what? A very high. Okay, I'm not gonna say a high percentage of people who do get into the addictive cycle of drinking, binge drinking, and or alcoholism, absolutely fuck their lives up forever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they don't always engage in other drug use. In fact,
That's right,
addiction
because
is
they
very-
don't need to. The alcohol is available everywhere. It is everywhere all the time. It is the most. This is why I say this comes from my very progressive side when I say it is too late, because alcohol is something that we have been raised with, societally incorporated into our lives. It has historically been ingrained into human society, and one of the reasons most of us exist, right? Because guys, our parents fucked while drunk as shit, because that's the way this works. This is just the way society works at this point.
my parents were good religious people. So.
Your parents were good religious people. I guarantee you, my parents fucked when they were drunk all the time. In fact, I'm not gonna get into any weird stories, but about my parents.
If
The
all
point-
drugs were
the-
gateway drugs,
I'm not
then
saying. I never
everyone
said all drugs are gateway drugs. I am saying being raised on a society based on alcohol acceptance. No one has a problem with alcohol unless they come from a family full of alcoholics. Then there's a stigma behind it that they personally have seen.
because
Nobody has a big stigma against smoking up until recently, when society, the Canadian government decided to put a stigma on smoking and taxes. Don't forget the fucking taxes.
most
People
people can
don't-
use drugs and not develop an addiction.
No.
Even when it comes to those illicit
No.
drugs.
No. Okay. I have never seen a study that says most people can do heroin and not develop an addiction. I'm pretty sure those studies don't exist.
So
I'm
you
pretty
don't
sure
think there's
most people.
who have only done heroin once in their life and never wanted to do it again.
I'm sure there are a select few people who've done heroin once in their life and never want to do it again. Do you know who those people are?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. I've never met an individual who's done heroin once in their life and went, eh. I'm going to admit that I have on occasion done a bunch of cocaine. I did not like it. On a,
of people who did cocaine once or twice and then never did again.
right, once or twice.
Yeah.
The point is that I know a lot of other people, and I know quite a few other people, names will not be named, who have done cocaine with me. And then when I refused to do cocaine with them on numerous occasions, they went out and did a fuck ton of cocaine with other people. And they will continue to do cocaine with other people, and they will always do cocaine with. Okay, maybe not
But-
always. At some point, things get really, really, really hectic, and people have to make a decision in their life whether they're going to pursue the cocaine addiction or whether they're going to, try to be productive human beings in life. Unless you come from a weird fucking place of trauma where you need to drown out the pain of something, chances are you could probably just wean yourself off of the cocaine. And as far as I understand from the people who used to do massive amounts of cocaine, just smoke pot and drink beer once in a while or some liquor. It's not like they're, the age-old thing of like, you don't get rid of addictions. You just replace them with other addictions. Right. So they don't necessarily replace their cocaine addiction or get rid of their cocaine addiction. They just dull out the need to do massive amount of cocaine with smoking pot and drinking a bunch of beer. I know people who don't like drinking. I know lots of people who don't like drinking. Some people don't like drinking because it makes them angry and violent. Some people don't like drinking because they don't see a point to it.
Yeah.
But everyone's got their vice. I don't know a single person who doesn't have a vice. May it be religion. May it be being right. May it be caffeine. Everyone has a vice. The question is, where does that vice take you? The question is, how do you deal with that vice, and how adaptive you are, I guess. How resilient you are. How well you can take the situations you're in. You can know people who've been clean for years and just everything falls apart in their life, and they just go, fuck it, heroin and arm.
Right, but like there's the thing is addiction. There's a difference between drug use and addiction, and you refuse to acknowledge the fact that the majority of the population can use drugs without getting addicted. And those who tend to get addicted are ones who usually have other forms of mental illness, and that addiction is a way of dealing with that mental illness.
That's I don't want to poo-poo all over half of the words you just said.
Go ahead.
Okay. People with mental problems, mental diseases are just people.
I think
everyone has
some sort of issue. Yeah.
Everyone has some sort of trauma. Everyone has some sort of issue. Everyone has some sort of problems in life. It all depends on how we deal with them. You yourself keep saying you want to actually do research on resilience to see what makes one person overcome issues more adaptively than other people who want to deal with their issues by injecting a fuck ton of heroin into their arm and just go to sleep for the next 48 hours until they have to get up and take a dick in the ass for another $40 so they can go back to sleep for another 48 hours. I'm sorry I have to use
No, it's fine.
a very extreme example, but
me,
those
I've read stories.
you've read those stories. You know who these people are. You know the people that become prostitutes who just make enough money to get their next hit of heroin, and who buy the hotel room.
Yeah.
Let a bunch of people do a bunch of weird shit to them, and hopefully not get fucking murdered that night, just so they can get their next hit of heroin and just go to sleep for 48 hours. You've read about them. I have met these people. I have spent time with these people. I've spoken to these people.
Okay, what does that have to do with the fact that majority of people can use drugs and not become addicted?
Depends on the drugs, depends on the addiction, depends on the feelings. Not everyone knows what it's like to drift off into the warm embrace of heroin. Some people just do coke and go, not for me, and expect all of the drugs to be cocaine. Some people smoke pot and go, not for me, and never try anything else.
Well, you touched on something about people who can't cope. So maybe it's not the drug, it's your ability to cope. And people who have a low coping ability are more likely to fall into addiction. Someone who has, is a strong person, who's resilient, who has a good support system, can drink, can do drugs, can try ecstasy for a good time, and then go back to their job on Monday and not do it for another year.
Right.
And not have a problem.
Right.
Whereas someone else, because they don't have those things and they're low resilient and they're depressed and they're whatever, will start escaping into the ecstasy.
Okay.
So I'm just saying that, so when you ask the question of and keep in mind that, again, I keep trying to differentiate between lifetime use and like past year use and past month use. And there's a reason we do that, because there's a difference in the type of person who does it within those contexts, given the type of age.
Right, but again, context. Why I bring this up. Some people learn to deal with their problems via alcohol. They sit down and they drink for fun. And then one day, they have a really bad day. And they choose to turn to alcohol to try to cheer themselves up. The alcohol will not have that effect on them when they're in a bad mood. And maybe give them a small painless feeling that they might want to make them escape. They might slowly slip further and further into alcohol every goddamn night till they come home and feel unhappy and try to recapture that feeling of numbness that the alcohol gives them. So they'll continue to escape into alcohol.
But it's not
maybe
the alcohol,
at
it's
some
the need
point
to
the
escape.
doctor tells them that they actually have a fractured finger somewhere and they can have some of these opioids to make the pain go away. And they take the opioids and they love the feeling of the opioids more than anything else. And they forget about the alcohol. Now they want to get their hands on the opioids because the opioids make them feel like the alcohol made them feel earlier.
We also haven't even touched on how a continuous alcohol use, a continuous drug use changes your brain. Like each time, like one time that you use a drug has a certain effect, and then another time, and it's repeated drug use that actually leads to addiction and the change, like the neuroplasticity changes in your brain.
Sure.
So
it's also
fascinating
plateaus. You have to consider drug plateaus as well. The first time you do, like a lot of people will openly admit that the first time they've ever tried a drug is the best that drug has ever been for them in their entire life, because it opens a completely brand new experience that they're always going to try and go back and recapture. But they'll never recapture it because that's the whole point. It's a brand new experience. It's this magical opening of the feeling. Now they know what that feeling is. The hedonic treadmill will never allow them to regain that feeling again. So what do? They try to reach that plateau again by doing more and more and more. And in fact, they'll even layer drugs to do it again. But it depends on
Right.
the experience of when they did it, how they did it, where they were trying to get when they did it, or occasionally just because they were trying to have fun. Some people don't even need drugs; they do have to have fun.
Right, but so like I'm saying, okay, fine. So maybe there's like a semi-level of addiction that everybody develops once they start engaging in any drug use. I don't know how comfortable I feel about saying that, but okay.
Well,
But-
if you want to talk about resilience yourself, what makes the
But
person resilient?
I'm just saying that it's the problem with drugs, because there could be a lot of, like, you can talk about pros and cons, like even alcohol use, or we talked about, for example, like smoking, and how even with the health consequences, smoking can sometimes help people get jobs, can somehow make people get connections, can help them network, can help them find friends, can help them. So right, so there are, but I'm just trying to say but smoking is, again, it's smoking is a different type of drug than the other drugs. But I just mean, like, majority of people can use drugs, and then there's this subset that abuse drugs. Yep. Why should the subset that abuse ruin it for everybody else? Okay. And B, maybe that subset, there's something else going on that leads them to their addiction and to the abuse, and it's usually escaping, that need to escape, or the raises in dopamine levels or serotonin levels, or maybe you have some different chemical imbalance in your brain. Like, there could be all sorts of things. That those individuals that end up becoming addicts, it's not necessarily drug. Maybe they would have been addicted. Maybe if alcohol didn't exist in this world, they would have become addicted to something else. Maybe it's just people who need to escape. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of research that goes on in addiction.
There's a little bit less research that needs to go into it, because you got to take into consideration the native population of Canada, for example. Why do I want to point them out? I want to point them out because they do not have a history of alcohol use. I am from the Soviet Union. I am Russian. Russians like to drink their vodka. It's a long history of vodka use and alcohol use. And it's a long history of alcoholism as well.
Yeah.
Russia
has insane rates of liver cancer, like all sorts of shit.
Russia didn't officially classify a beer as alcohol up until like 10 years ago. So let's just let the Soviet fucking anyway. Anyway, but the people who didn't have alcohol within their,
how long have we been going for?
55 minutes minus 2 minutes.
Okay.
The people who didn't grow up with alcohol in their culture, who haven't had generational uses of alcohol, actually have, if you look at the Asians, they have a lower tolerance for it. They don't process it as well. But the native population, who almost has none of it, actually have a really high addiction rate.
Yeah.
They don't have the coping mechanism. They don't metabolize it properly, and they have an incredibly high addiction rate, especially since it's everywhere.
Well, I think, maybe there's like a genetic, like European cultures or other cultures have had alcohol in their history, might have created some sort of immunity, because it's really interesting that there is cultural differences of how alcohol affects you. Even types of food. Like Indian food is spicier for a reason, and their digestive systems have been built in a way.
No, they haven't. No, I'm sorry. There's
there's
a reason they shit in the streets. Okay,
no,
I'm sorry.
infrastructure.
I eat Indian food, and I also want to shit in the streets.
Okay, but we don't. Yes, no, like that's a whole separate thing. It has nothing to do with the food. I'm just saying that, like, you build different tastes and immunity.
I don't think that the way Indians poop is any different than the way I poop after eating Indian food.
Like Chinese people or Japanese people, for instance, seem to have a lower, not Japanese actually, just Chinese people, I think, that have a lower
It's
tolerance for
alcohol.
yeah.
No, it's absolutely Japanese. If you watch
No,
enough
'cause they
anime,
have
you'll see
sake and no, Japanese people drink.
not a lot. No, not a lot. They even have the stereotype in anime: the person who's got a few drinks and is drunk off his ass. They drink and they drink a lot. They just don't metabolize the
Yeah.
alcohol.
And their
as
vodka
fast.
is like 20% vodka.
Right.
Yeah.
So they'll take a couple of shots and they'll get drunk for a much longer duration. While other people who grew up with alcohol, or raised or have a culture of alcohol, their systems genetically passed on and know how to metabolize the liquor.
Yeah. And like, and there's even, so there's research that actually has shown that like what me and you do, for example, of having 1 or 2 beers a night, that's actually has health benefits as opposed to this culture of binge drinking. No, I'm serious. I'm not making
Sorry,
this up.
you guys couldn't see me winking at her. I was like, yeah, absolutely.
No.
1 or 2 cigarettes a day absolutely has all the health benefits. 1 or 2 glasses of wine a day absolutely has all the health benefits. 1 or 2 joints a day, all
look,
the health benefits.
binge-
You'll live longer.
Binge drinking, not drinking for a whole week, and then binge drinking on the weekends, which is a lot of our millennial culture, is what we do with our friends when we go out, when we go to clubs, when we go to restaurants. They don't drink throughout the week. Drinking regularly a few days a week is actually healthier for you than not drinking throughout the week and then getting smashed on weekends.
Right, but what if you don't drink all week and then you have 2 beers at the end of the week?
That's fine.
Okay, so
Yeah.
again, moderation more than.
But this idea that
binge
people
drinking.
think that like getting smashed on the weekends and stuff like that,
people
like-
think. People,
like that's having these are not addiction. Is that addiction? Maybe do people look forward to getting wasted on the weekend? Yeah,
Yes.
I guess. Yeah, they do.
Okay. Up until not too long ago, me and you were getting together with people on Friday nights and literally clearing 3 or 4 bottles of hard liquor. There was 4 of us, and we
Yeah,
cleared at
when
least
we were
4 bottles of
younger,
liquor
yeah.
a night.
Yeah,
And
when
we'd all
you're-
wake up feeling like shit the next day and horrible. And
when you're younger, your hangovers weren't that bad. Now
yeah,
it's
okay.
like
We
it
also
really-
learned to eat while drinking and a bunch of other stuff. But like eventually, we learned that we can't keep up with the hard liquor run. But what are you supposed to do? You get together with your people. You're celebrating the fact that you're off of work and you're gonna get the next couple of days off, and you just get escapist, I guess. You run to the thing that makes you forget about what the fuck you've been doing all week. Some people more than others. You, for instance, may have been trying to escape from reading all those horrible stories of people continuously being abused by the people closest to them.
Yeah.
Like that's some fucked up shit to continue reading all week long and having to fucking punch it in as data and recap it to like the world, and then only think of these people as numbers later.
No, that's not what happens.
Go on.
I don't think of these people as numbers. I should, but I don't.
I think of these people as numbers. 75%, 20%, 30%, 40%. 70% of people smoke pot. 40% of the people.
Yeah, a lot of
do
people
coke.
smoke pot.
I'm willing to bet the majority is no
I
overlap.
don't know how you were surprised. Like, you don't think that the majority of people living in North America will have ever tried it once?
I
in
believe
their
that the
life?
majority of people.
that's
I
literally the
believe that the
question.
majority of people who live in North America smoke pot at one point or another in their lives, whether they're willing to admit it or not.
Well,
is the
over
problem.
70 people are admitting it.
70% of people are admitting that they tried it once. No, they might not be admitting when they're doing it or how they're doing it.
No, about 60% are saying they've done it in the past year. And about 40% say they've done it in the past month. Maybe less. Probably less.
And now how many people are going to admit that they've been doing it? Now we're going to have an entire culture, an entire generation being raised with marijuana smoke in the air. Like people have done.
Just like
No.
air
Listen.
and alcohol and
Listen.
tobacco
People have
smoke in
been
the air.
doing fucking research and blaming fucking cancer on secondhand cigarette smoke. Imagine what the millennials are going to do with secondhand marijuana smoke.
Second.
What I am
guess
personally.
the research will have to happen.
I am personally having to work on a rooftop of government housing. Do you know what I smell every goddamn day on top of government housing?
Cigarettes.
No, not cigarettes. Since I'm working on the roof, people's bathroom vents are just venting stuff out, just out. And you know what I'm smelling all day fucking long? I'm smelling marijuana. So I know the people who are living in government housing are just fucking chain smoking marijuana all day
That
long.
I don't know about.
I do because I'm on top of the roofs. And you know what else I've noticed? Almost every single one of these people who lives in government housing owns a dog. I have never seen so many goddamn dogs in my life. Our break room is actually underneath someone else's apartment, and I guarantee you they have 3 dogs. And I'm not making this up. The dogs go into the backyard and bark at us. They have 3 dogs, 2 tiny ones and a bigger medium-sized dog. A kid and most of the family living there, in government housing. I cannot fully admit that they've been smoking pot. That's probably not where I'm smelling the pot from. And all of these people have relatively decent cars. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm not sure how much of my tax money is going into paying for people's dogs and their housing. And I'm not sure if the government housing is actually going to be using the solar panels we're installing to provide freer electricity for the people living there, or if the guy who owns the properties is just going to sell the electricity back to the grid to make more money for himself. On the other hand, I personally kind of want to buy a large portion of land, develop it.
Okay.
Okay, well, fuck it. We'll just turn off the camera. All right, guys. Have a good night, I guess.
No, I just don't. Usually
What?
it's an hour, and so I'm confused as to how long.
I'm literally wrapping up.
Oh, okay, so wrap up.
I guess that was it. Thanks a lot. I want to buy government. I want to buy land and develop it so the government can pay me money to put poor people in it. It's better than putting them in shelters. But I guess that's a topic for another night.